Stop losing all your players to the transfer portal. With EA changing the way that deal breakers work in College Football 26, it's so much more important for you to have a game plan for both building and maintaining your powerhouse. In this year's game, every single player has a deal breaker. And not only that, but these deal breakers are dynamic, so they can change over the course of his entire career. So as a freshman, he could care about proximity to home, but all the way as a senior, he might now care about brand exposure, and if he's not happy enough, he will leave. This has caused an uproar in the community. From Reddit to other social media platforms, people are complaining about how hard it is to be able to keep the players on their roster, especially when they've worked so hard to be able to recruit them in the first place, and then they leave right away. The knowledge on how to combat these challenges is not well known, but after using these tips, you'll have a huge advantage from the others in your dynasty. There are 14 different school grades when looking at your team's school. These total 14 school grades make up the composite team prestige star rating that you have. Now, 8 of these 14 grades are extremely important because those are the ones that dictate player retention. But there are some ways to be able to manipulate these grades, some obviously more than others. Therefore, roster retention is so important also in the way that you construct your team. So I'll also add a little bit of tips later on in the video to show you how to build your roster to be able to keep them. But out of those 8 important school grades, the first one is brand exposure. Now this one is one that's a little bit tricky to manipulate. It can absolutely be manipulated, but if you look at what the grade says, it says that brand exposure is measured by how much attention your program gets relative to the rest of the country. So nationally televised games, you'll see playoff games, games of the week, games that you're playing basically against highly touted opponents. Those are the ones that are going to count in this grade. So even if you're choosing a small school, just putting a bunch of high-ranked teams in your schedule and playing against them, whether you win or lose, will increase the grade. Just having an appearance down there on the bottom, you see accounts for some of the grade. But also, obviously, winning is going to give you a whole lot bigger of a boost and going to climb that grade a lot faster. A school who's a lot better than this, if you look down here at like a Duke, for instance, their brand exposure is a B-, and they've only had 10 appearances, but won 7 of their televised games. So it doesn't take a lot to be able to get this brand exposure up, but it's something that we can definitely focus on. It's not going to be something that over the course of the season you're going to have a drastic change. You're not going to go from an F to an A+ in 1 year, but it's something just to think about a little bit if you wanted to increase that grade. If you're someone who likes to change the schedule, or if you're allowed in your league to change the schedule, adding some top tier opponents, especially if you're someone who's going to be winning a lot of those games, can really help you out. And a lot of the top tier recruits and players really care about brand exposure. It's one of those things that the blue chip players really care about. So it's important to have a good grade here. But this grade will decrease if you're not scheduling games against high-ranked opponents. Now, there's another way you can also do this. You can become the high-ranked team yourself. By just winning games and becoming nationally ranked, you're going to have more TV games, more playoff games, and that grade is just going to increase because you're the team who's the highly ranked opponent. So even just by playing and winning games regularly, this will naturally increase. You can just make it a little bit faster by playing higher-ranked teams. But very close to this is the second one, which is Championship Contender. Now, this is one that also kind of plays on the same playing field, but also is a little bit different than brand exposure. This one is solely based on your odds of winning a championship. Now that could be a conference championship, that could be the college football playoff, the national championship. Winning games is going to increase the score really fast, and this is one that you can manipulate extremely well. You can start as an F and go all the way up to a B or even an A. If you're winning all of your games and make it to the college football playoff, that is a huge advantage for you. Delaware, we started down there in the F to D- range, and we're already at a C-. All I did was simulate an entire season. We ended up winning 6 games. I didn't physically play any of them, but we already increased to a C-, which unlocked a lot of prospects. But this one is really important to also think about, because when this is increasing over the course of the season, it will unlock other players that originally had locked you out in recruiting. So this is one, if you are winning your games and you're 3-0, 4-0 to start the season, definitely want to go take a look at the recruiting board. Some of the players at the beginning of the year, if you were a small school and had a low grade, they will have locked you out at the beginning of the season just because of the deal breaker. But now that you hit their threshold and criteria, you might be able to find multiple 3-, 4-star players that had locked you out originally because they didn't think you were a contender, and now all of a sudden you're a contender again and you can get those guys on your board. There's been multiple seasons where I've signed multiple blue chip players just halfway through the season after winning some games. So don't forget about that, and definitely go check your board to add some of those players to it. Now obviously if you're a higher school, this is going to be a better grade in general already. So winning games and continuing to win games will keep that grade high. If you start to lose games and start to slide a little bit in the rankings, that's going to pretty quickly negatively impact you and can lead to some players leaving. The third one is your coach prestige. Now this is one that can't change very quickly. It does change, but it's more of an off-season change. It's something that's going to be impacted by how successful you are on the field. Winning games the same exact as your brand exposure and your championship contender. Increasing both of those will no doubt increase your coach prestige. Now, the only thing you really can edit is your own coach prestige, but winning games with the coordinators on your roster will also slowly increase their grade as well. I know with Delaware, for instance, we started out, both of our coordinators were an F, and just winning 6 games, they went up to a D+. So not a huge increase, but that did increase because you saw that our coach prestige grade was a D. So by the end of the offseason, I would assume this is going to be more like a C- now, since we are C, D+, D+, which should open the door for quite a bit more prospects because a lot of the 3 and 4 stars, they care about somewhere between that C- to B- range for coach prestige. Now, this can be also a very, very negative thing. I'll talk more about it later in the video when we talk about some of the tips for recruiting. But whenever you're picking a big school, think about the coach that you're going to be taking over for. That coach could be a B+, an A, A-, whatever he was. You're going to be joining as a brand new coach at like a C or a C- for your coach prestige. That is going to absolutely tank your coach prestige. And a lot of the players on your roster might have cared about coach prestige, which would make a lot of them leave, which really adds to choosing a smaller school who they don't really care that much about coach prestige, working your way up the ranks and eventually taking a job at your dream school, which I know is what a lot of people enjoy to do, and that helps a lot out with player retention. But just know that if you like to take over your dream school right away, that's cool, but that will also really negatively impact you, and there's really not much you can do about that to fix it, because it takes a while to get your coach prestige high enough. You can make a pretty good increase of your own personal coach, but unless you fire your other coordinators and hire really high top tier ones, the odds of you getting this coach grade from being really bad to really good really quickly is not high. And although coach stability is not included in those top 8, it's also worth noting because it does have a very close tie-in with your coach prestige. If you're constantly firing and signing new coordinators, that's going to negatively impact your stability, which is also going to negatively impact how well you can recruit in the first place. Fourth on the list is your conference prestige. Now, this one is also one that doesn't really change super much over the course of the season. It can change a little bit, but the problem is if you look at what the definition is, it says that it's the strength of the teams in your conference relative to the rest of the country. So it's not just your teams overall. You could go undefeated and be number 1 in the country, but if you're playing in the Sun Belt, you're still playing in the Sun Belt, and it's not going to be an A+. You're not going to overtake the Big Ten for the number 1 conference. The smaller schools don't really change a ton because there's just so many different factors that need to happen. You need to have all of the teams in your conference become higher ranked. They don't have to become top 25, but they have to become higher ranked where the average team overall is higher than one of the other lower tiers. So this is not one that's going to be consistent that you're going to be able to change that much other than just leaving your conference and going to a higher one or just doing your own part and winning games and becoming ranked to help increase that grade. The 5th point is playing style, and this is one that not a lot of people know about because EA actually tells you what they're looking for every single archetype. If you look at your My School grades and you scroll over to the playing style menu, you can actually bring down this drop down box and scroll through all of the different archetypes in the game for every single position, and it tells you how to improve. It tells you exactly what they're looking for. So someone, for instance, with a dual threat quarterback, they care a lot about the offensive pass yards per game. It says very high impact, and then it tells you to the right of that exactly what your team's offensive pass yards per game is. So in the sim season with Delaware, we averaged 256 yards passing, which then you see on the right side at the bottom of the screen, we are a D. So that is not good by any means, and not a lot of people care about that. But then, for instance, you scroll over to a pure runner quarterback, and they care about the rushing yards per game of quarterbacks, which our average is 7, which is terrible. So clearly they're a D- over there, and no one cares about it, so no one's going to be joining the team. But if you're someone who really likes to run with your quarterback, not a lot of teams just in general run for a huge amount of yards. So if you're someone who runs for 100, 150, 200 yards with your quarterback every game, you can get this up to an A+ and have just a completely dominant impact over everyone else in the transfer portal and recruiting in general, and being able to get and keep players because they're going to be happy because you're doing something that's niche that not everyone else is doing. So there's absolutely ways that you can manipulate this. And as you play more and more seasons and your own style of play comes out in your stats by the more games that you play. The amount of talent who cares about coming to your school or staying at your school is going to reflect that. So it really does help in this matter to just focus specifically on whatever you're looking for. If you're trying to find quarterbacks who are more of a run-heavy quarterback, then getting rushing yards with your quarterback is going to help that out. Because you see all the other ones, dual threat, your backfield creator, and your pocket passer, all three of the other archetypes of quarterback only care about offensive pass yards per game. So really, if you just throw for a lot of yards and then specifically make it a point to run with your quarterback for 50 plus yards a game, you're really going to have a great chance at all of the quarterback archetypes. One thing they significantly changed with this is on the defensive side of the ball. Last year, people cared about TFLs, sacks, and interceptions, and some of those things were kind of difficult to be able to manipulate because you just can't make the opposing quarterback throw interceptions. So if you had a down year and didn't have very many interceptions, people would want to leave. And this year, they changed it up a ton, and all of the defensive backs care about your defensive pass yards per game. So this is going to be much more consistent and true to how good your defense is. But there is one caveat to that, because the strong safety box specialist is the only one that's different. That's just total tackles. So if you're someone who kind of gets torched a lot in defense, you have a bad school, you have a bad secondary, you still might be able to focus on getting some box specialists. Now, they might not be the fastest guys in the world, but all they care about is tackling for the playing style. So you could just try to rack up a lot of tackles with your safeties, and that can help you get some 4- and 5-star players on your team. But what's important to note is that it's not team tackles. What it says here is just total tackles. But if you scroll through multiple different positions, you see that that number is different. So for outside linebackers who care about tackling, the total tackles, it says 68 for us. You scroll over to our Mike linebackers, that now says 84. And if we remember, whenever we looked at safety, the box specialist, it was 128. So it's really just position group based tackles. So if you're someone who runs a lot of dime and you don't have a lot of linebackers on the field consistently, it might be a little bit more challenging for you to have a good grade in tackling for those specific archetypes, just because they're not on the field. Because people are going to want to stay at your school if they're on the field making impact plays. If they're on the sidelines and they never really get a chance to play, they're probably not going to be that happy and want to leave. The next point, the sixth one, is playing time. Now, this is one that's really, really important as well, just as much as playing style is. This is one that also can be manipulated quite a lot. Now, playing time in this game is different from last game. Last game, it was based on the projected overall of the player. This year in College Football 26, it is based on the number of snaps that the player has and how many snaps they assume they're going to be having over the next course of their career in college. So if they're a junior, they're looking at their junior season and their senior season, how much are they going to play? Now this year, it has a lot of factors tying into it. So one, having them on the field for as many snaps as possible is going to increase that grade. Two, if you're someone who blows out your opponents and has tons of fast one-play scores, you might not have that many total snaps, even though you scored 100 points. You might have only been on the field for 35 plays. That's going to look like he's not playing, so he is going to want to leave. So it's something to keep in mind, that being a little bit more of a game management type situation player, where you're making sure that you're getting the actual reps in the game over the course of the whole game and over the whole season, is going to help you out a lot. Now, that's also really, really important on defense. If you're getting torched and allowing so many huge touchdown plays immediately, your defensive players are not on the field that long, because they're always on the sideline because they just gave up a touchdown. So they're going to want to leave because they think that they're not playing that much, even if they started for the whole season, or even if your receiver had 50 catches for 5,000 yards. If they were all one-play bombs and then they didn't see the field for another 4 or 5 minutes because the CPU was on offense, that is going to look bad in their total grade at the end, which is something that, whether you agree or disagree with it, that is something that heavily impacts whether they stay or not. And also to look at when you're looking at your playing time is, you can see on the side of the screen here on the right side, it talks about the running backs that I currently have on my board. It gives me their projected grade for starting and how much playing time they're going to be having. So 2 of these guys on my board are an A+ immediately. So this is thinking these guys are going to start basically right out the gate, and the guys who are down there at a D are probably not going to play, or they might just be kind of more in a bench role. So you would hope that those 3-star guys don't care that much about playing time, because that could be a reason that they'd leave. Now, also to think about whenever you're signing all these players is that the players on your actual active roster know who you're recruiting and know that their time might be limited. If you're going to bring in this 5-star stud wide receiver, and now you have currently your number one receiver's a 76 overall who's a junior, he's thinking, oh no, I'm just going to lose my spot. So his playing time grade could be decreasing even if he's getting adequate snaps, because he thinks he's going to lose his job next year because you're bringing in all this talent. So if you have a stud player at a starting position, you might want to hold off on getting some more stud recruits. You could get some more mediocre recruits as fillers for backups to allow your stud to thrive. But if you make it too competitive there with stacking good players at the same position at the same time, that can really, really negatively impact him. It might be very difficult for you to somehow find a way to make him happy. The seventh one to look at is your pro potential. Now this is one that can be manipulated, but it takes a long time to do it. Because if you look at the actual definition, it shows that it tracks the last 4 years of draft picks for that team at that specific position. So it's not just getting players drafted in the last 4 years, kind of like how last year's game was. This one is, it rewards you for making a quarterback factory, a wide receiver factory, becoming linebacker you. If you want to find just all of these studs and you keep them in one position group, you will get significantly rewarded for that. So kind of looking around and seeing what your other Dynasty members are doing or what the other AI is kind of focused on, you can kind of just choose maybe one offensive and one defensive position group that you just want to be known for. And you're going to get so rewarded for that. And picking a position group that has multiple players is going to be even more rewarding. So picking someone like a wide receiver or a defensive back is going to get you way, way, way more potential benefit than something like a quarterback who's only starting one at a time. And like we learned in our last few tips, having 2 and 3 stud quarterbacks at the same time could make them all leave. Whereas having wide receivers, you could have 3 or 4 studs at wide receiver at the same time because they can all start. Same for defensive backs. You could have, a safety, a strong safety, a free safety, multiple corners. You could really double, triple, and quadruple dip into that pro potential grade for many, many years to come. And it's just very, very beneficial. So instead of spreading out all of that talent, obviously first you need to build your roster and make yourself a good program. But if you're already a good program, why not just try to focus on becoming a complete factory at some position groups? And you might even have the hours to be able to be more than one. You could be running back and quarterback factory. The last one is proximity to home, and this is one that can't really be manipulated at all. It just is based off of where the player's hometown is compared to where your school is. Your school's not moving and neither is the player, so that grade is going to be the same forever. In the old game, it used to be you just kind of stock up on these guys because you know they'd never leave since your school would never change location. But in this game, now that it's a dynamic deal breaker and can change, it doesn't mean that it's safe, but it is safe for at least the season that they're there. But so I already gave you some tips over the course of those 8 points, but we'll add in a little bit more tips for you guys staying at the end of the video. Again, if you guys love this type of content and you want to see more of it, make sure you sub to the channel because I'm putting out more content like this over the course of the rest of this game so that you guys always have the advantage in your dynasties. The first tip that I have for you guys is with your playing time. Again, it is very, very important to look at the playing time because it is very, very risky. Just because it's an A+ at one point doesn't mean it's going to stay an A+. And that also has a lot to do with how you upgrade your players. Upgrading someone on your roster during the player progression phase can significantly change what their playing time is. Just because you have some nice depth guys who got a decent amount of upgrades, if you upgrade them all too much where they get too good, they can start to kind of crowd out some of those starters, making them feel like they're kind of risking their starting job, even though you know they aren't. But that could drop them down to an A-, a B-. That could potentially make them in like the yellow to orange range for leaving, and that's not something you want to tinker with. Sometimes you can get away with using something like a split backfield with 2 running backs, and now with the formation subs, it just makes it so much easier to do that. If I wanted to put in my backup running back, I could just simply go to whatever formation I want to do that in, switch and put a backup running back in there. I put that in for maybe 5, 10 different formations out of my playbook, and without even having to think about it, without having to go into the menu and sub people in and out, this man is automatically getting more playing time just because he's on the field more often. You could do that with any of your spots. If you're a heavy run team, you're not even using some of the receivers, throw in some of your backup receivers who want playing time, just throw them in there somewhere where they're way outside of the play and they're not going to make an impact, but that they're getting a snap. So there are different ways that you can kind of tinker with this and maneuver it to be able to benefit you quite a bit. Just make sure you don't spread yourself too thin, because you can't make promises for playing time for 4, 5, 6 different running backs. It's just not going to happen. And again, when recruiting, it does still impact your playing time. So like for instance, this guy right here, he wants a B-. I have a B+ in playing time. If I was to recruit too many guys that would be projected to be around this like 75 overall, 73 overall, that could really make him start to question whether he's going to play next year, and that could make him want to leave in the offseason. So I'd be fine if I'm recruiting guys that are going to be for sure underneath that overall. So really, ideally, any 3-star and below for this guy's purposes, he would be probably cool with. But if you were getting a 4-star or a 5-star in the transfer portal, all of a sudden this thing drops to a D- and he's done. He's going to be leaving at the end of the year. There's really not much you can do. You just have to hope he gets so many upgrades that you can somewhat salvage it. But as you scroll down the next one, you see playing style. Another tip for that is it's so good actually this year playing style as it was last year. Last year was kind of tough to kind of keep some people with that playing style grade, since some of the grades were just really hard to achieve. Whereas this year they're more team focused, team passing yards, team rushing yards, etc. And so getting guys that are depth positions, they could be studs, they could be fine, they could be little project pieces, but having someone who wants a playing style, it's not them who needs the stats, it's the team or that position group who needs the stats. So you can have 4, 5, 6 guys that are way deep in the bench spot that will be happy because the rest of your team is getting offensive passing yards, tackles for loss, whatever it is. So playing style is one of the ones that I really like to focus on for those depth positions. And if they're a starter, hey, who cares? They're going to be happy either way. But if they're a bench player for their entire career, they're still going to be happy because you're getting the stats that they want. Another tip, again, for championship contender, it fluctuates the most out of all of the grades, but it has the highest upside for small schools. For instance, this quarterback, he wants a B-, we have a C-. So right now, he would definitely be leaving if the season ended today. If this was the beginning of the year and we were able to manually play some games and win a decent amount of them, we could absolutely get this up to a B-, and this guy would be staying. So it's one of those ones that just because it's in the red right now doesn't mean it'll stay there. Winning a couple games, getting a nice little win streak, making it to a bowl game, those things can significantly change it, and that guy can still stay on the squad. Now, something like coach prestige is something that's also just way too risky for me, in my opinion. I will use it sometimes on some guys, especially when you're a good school, but the fact that it can change so quickly and negatively impact so many players is just a big turnoff for me. Like, for instance, this guy wants a B for coach prestige, because we have a D since we're a new school, obviously, but say we were even a top tier program. Those coordinators also impact it. So just because you're not leaving doesn't mean that that grade is safe. One of your coordinators could go to the NFL, could retire, could get poached from another school and immediately drop that grade to a C- or worse, like in the course of one off season. And that could literally happen where you take this guy, say you had a B, you get him signed, and then your coordinator leaves. Now all of a sudden, all of those guys you just signed for coach prestige are now tempted to leave. And it's something that's going to be very difficult for you to be able to get back and recover, since it's not a very quick recovering deal breaker. So just be really careful if you want to use coach prestige as the deal breaker choice for some of the players. It can be great if you're going to keep the same coordinators and coaching staff for a long time, but if there's a lot of movement, it really could negatively impact you. Proximity to home is really nice. It's probably the safest grade since it doesn't move, but it doesn't really give you an advantage in recruiting as opposed to some of the other school grades where they're more fluctuating. You can actually be better than other schools. Every single person that's in the same proximity is going to get the same grade as you. So it doesn't really give you an advantage, but it's very safe, especially for small schools and larger schools. It's safe for everyone. But the problem is, now that it's a dynamic deal breaker, that doesn't mean it's going to stay like that forever. It can change. And you just hope it doesn't change to something like coach prestige or brand exposure or something that's going to be tough for you to be able to change quickly. Next, there's just a few tips for when to upgrade and how to upgrade your players in the offseason to really just prime you the best possible way for retention. So now that we have the basics covered for manipulating the school grades to be able to keep players, it's also important to know how to use your points in the offseason if you're using manual progression. There are ways that you can do this to give you the best possible chance at being able to keep the most amount of players. For instance, if we're looking at the receiving recruits that I have here in Delaware, you can see every one of them obviously still has their deal breaker. The first one here is a pro potential deal breaker. This guy is a senior, so If he's a senior, it's pretty much a free-for-all. You can spend all of your points any way that you want to, upgrade his overall, upgrade his abilities. It doesn't really matter because he's not going to be on the team next year since he's a senior. Now, there's a caveat to that, though, because you don't want to upgrade, say he was this senior, for instance, who's down here at number 4. If you were to upgrade him and max him to wide receiver number 1, you could make someone, if they had, like, for instance, this guy, a playing time grade. If Nicholas LeBoy was a higher overall than Ja'Carry Kelly, that could make Ja'Carry Kelly want to leave. We don't know how much is going to drop from him being wide receiver 3 to wide receiver 4 in the depth chart, but that is something to consider. So what I would personally do if I was upgrading LeBoy is I would upgrade him up to the same overall or close to the same overall as Ja'Carry Kelly, and then I would try to focus more on upgrading abilities that aren't going to change his overall, making him have a higher risk of making Ja'Carry Kelly leave. And that whole idea will make more sense as I kind of explain more of it. For instance, this guy. This is someone who wants to leave. This is a guy who's close to leaving, and he's a junior. So he's not young, but he's also not at the complete end of his career at this point yet, although he's close. He has a deal breaker for playing style, and we are so close. We are a C- to a C. That is something that's easily achievable over the course of the season. So this is someone that I would definitely focus on upgrading. I would definitely want to upgrade his overall a little bit, but I wouldn't want to do too much though, because if I upgraded his overall, say from a 65, and I had enough points to upgrade him to a 72 or a 75 even, that would probably bump up his deal breaker to maybe wanting a B- or a straight B for playing style, and make it a lot more difficult for me to be able to actually achieve that. Now, every single person's different, depending on your style of play. Receivers, all of them want receptions, so if you're not someone who throws the ball a ton and gives your receivers 180 to 200 receptions in a season, you might kind of struggle to get that grade. So if you're someone who struggles in achieving a consistent B plus in something, you might want to just kind of tone back how much you're focusing on upgrading their overall. Something like speed, awareness, play recognition, upgrades that are going to significantly impact the player's actual overall. Whereas you could focus on things that aren't necessarily going to upgrade his overall as fast. Some of the kind of behind the scenes, like maybe for a receiver, their break tackle ability, their elusiveness, something that's a secondary category that definitely helps in game, but it's not something that's going to shoot up his overall. Or again, you could focus on upgrading their abilities, trying to get to a gold or a platinum ability, as long as obviously that ability isn't something that's going to be jacking up his overall. Then you look at a guy like this. Again, he's a senior, so normally seniors, all bets are off, send the house, do whatever you need to do to upgrade all of his points to make him a stud, since this is his last hurrah and he's leaving anyway. But pretend he wasn't a senior, he has a conference prestige deal breaker of a B-. We're a C-. Again, that is something that we are not going to be able to hit. There's no way that we are hitting a B- conference prestige. Even if we went undefeated and won the national championship, we are not going to be hitting a B- for our grade. We might hit a C, maybe hit a C+ if all the cards fall right. But this guy is as good as gone, basically, at the end of the season. So there's really no point in saving upgrades or trying to be strategic about the way that you upgrade. Just send all the points on him, make him have one crazy season, and let him go. And maybe in the off chance, you upgrade him high enough that he actually changes his deal breaker to something else. You could maybe get this guy high enough overall that he no longer cares about conference prestige. And not that it will happen, but it could. And you could change it to a brand exposure, or it could change to a championship contender. Since they do change over the course of the season, it is based on how high of an overall they are, or also based on what their original star rating was in recruiting. If you upgrade into a higher overall, you have a chance of maybe re-rolling it into something that actually you could salvage. If you could find a way to just jack this guy's overall and somehow he changes to a championship contender, now that's something you could find a way to save him. And then we look at someone like this, where this is a guy that so far we're keeping. He is happy, he's cool being on the roster. This is one that you definitely want to be cautious for, because if you upgrade him too fast, that B- playing time is going to turn into an A-, and then you're going to have to make sure you guarantee that this man is now second or first in the depth chart. So I like to personally upgrade my playing time players first in the offseason. I slowly upgrade them to just see where I can get them comfortably, that I feel like I can keep them over the course of the full season. I don't feel like I'm risking anything. And these are the guys, again, I try to more focus on the abilities for rather than the actual overall attributes. Because right now, him being at a B-, that's a good spot. I like that spot. It's not too risky, and it's not too much of a promise that I'm going to end up breaking it. I have him as a B+ right now, which is good, but that will kind of fluctuate with the amount of snaps that he's getting. So I could very well easily see that decreasing. Same with when we sign people in the transfer portal, or whenever I find recruits that I'm adding to my board. It's going to bring it down. So I don't really want his want to be exactly what our actual grade is, because that's just setting you up for disaster. It's setting you up to not be able to bring anyone in recruiting. Whereas if I keep him here at a B-, I can bring in a couple recruits who are kind of around the same overall, because I know this guy's a junior. We're going to advance to next year. He'll be a senior when those guys are now on the squad, and then I won't care because he'll be leaving at the end of the season anyway, and I can let my studs shine. But that is just a few of the tips on how to cut down the amount of players that are leaving in the transfer portal. I hope you found this video to be beneficial and helpful for you guys. Definitely let me know in the comments if you learned anything new and if you're going to try anything out in your own dynasties. Love to see how the progress goes and how you guys have improved over it. But after using these tips, your friends are going to be absolutely shocked at how good your team gets so fast and how you're able to just keep and maintain all of those studs. But again, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one. So until then, why don't you check out one of these ones.